What if having fewer friends is the greatest sign of emotional maturity? In a world that rewards noise, what if silence is your greatest power? You're not broken. You're just finally becoming selective. In a world obsessed with connection, many still feel unseen. We measure value in numbers: how many followers, how many birthday wishes, how many people show up when things are easy. But few ever ask, who remains when things get quiet? Society teaches us that being alone is failure, that having fewer friends means something's wrong. You're labeled as cold, awkward, antisocial. But what if solitude isn't a weakness? What if it's a sign of awakening? The Stoics knew this long before social media existed. To them, wisdom was not found in noise, but in stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Associate with those who will make you better." They believed, when you have clarity of values, you no longer crave crowds. When you find peace in your own company, you stop performing for applause. You start choosing quality over quantity. So ask yourself, are you alone because you've been left behind, or because you finally stopped following? There is a quiet strength in saying no. No to drama. No to empty conversations. No to relationships that drain more than they give. This isn't about closing your heart, it's about protecting it. When you live with intention, you attract the same. You draw in those who value depth, honesty, and stillness. Not the ones who cheer the loudest, but the ones who stay the longest. You gain something even more rare than popularity. You gain alignment, time to grow, peace to reflect, a life that doesn't demand explanation, only presence. Maybe you've been told you're too private, too intense, or too different. But what if that's exactly where your power lives? What if having fewer friends doesn't mean you failed, but that you've finally found the courage to stop settling? The Stoics believe that our inner world shapes the outer one, and when you guard your space with discernment, you're not isolating yourself, you're freeing yourself. So no, you don't need 1,000 people to understand you, you just need a few to truly see you. And sometimes, the most courageous act you'll ever perform is to walk alone, calm, clear, and unwavering in who you are. If this speaks to your soul, stay with me, because in this video, we'll walk that quiet path together. If being alone scares you, it might be because you've never truly met yourself. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's where your real power begins. We live in a world that confuses being alone with being incomplete, but solitude is not a flaw to fix, it's a space to grow. Not everyone fears silence. For some, it's a sanctuary, a chosen state, not forced upon them, but embraced. Why? Because silence reveals what noise hides. Society rarely tells this story. It teaches us that if we're not constantly connected, constantly seen, we must be missing something. That if you're not surrounded by people, there must be something wrong with you. But the Stoics disagreed. To them, solitude wasn't a punishment, it was a gift. A discipline, a return. Epictetus, once a slave, later a philosopher, said it clearly: he who knows how to live alone is never alone. Because solitude isn't about the absence of people, it's about the presence of self. It's the ability to sit with your own thoughts without needing distraction, to breathe without validation, to exist without explanation. That is strength. Have you ever noticed how quickly we reach for noise? The phone, the scrolling, the constant need to engage. Why? Because silence demands honesty, and honesty can be uncomfortable, but the Stoic mind leans into it, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly, because in the stillness, you start to hear your real voice. You begin to shed what isn't yours, you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You can't truly connect with others if you've never truly connected with yourself. You can't offer depth if you're always living on the surface. That's why so many feel alone, even in crowded rooms, because what they're missing isn't people, it's presence. and presence begins with you. So no, being alone isn't sad, it isn't broken, it isn't less, it's powerful, it's where your mind resets, where your emotions breathe, where your purpose clarifies, and in that silence, you learn to master the only thing you were ever meant to control, yourself. So if you've been walking alone lately, don't rush to fill the silence, don't apologize for needing space, don't explain your absence from the noise. You might just be in the most sacred place of all, you, whole, unshaken, alive. Let the world call it loneliness, you know the truth. It's your power. Finally waking up, what if being liked by everyone means you betrayed yourself more than once? In a world obsessed with being seen, few dare to be real. We live in a time where visibility is confused with value, where the number of likes replaces genuine connection, where applause feels more important than alignment. But here's a hard truth: popularity isn't proof of worth. You can be admired by thousands and still feel deeply alone. You can be celebrated for a version of you that doesn't even exist. The Stoics saw this coming long before we had smartphones or followers. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It's not the man who has too little, but the one who craves more, who is truly poor." He wasn't just talking about wealth, he was talking about attention, validation, the addiction to being liked, because craving approval is a quiet kind of slavery. It makes you shape-shift, smile when you're tired, say yes when you mean no, hide your truth just to keep the peace, and the more you do it, the more distant you become from yourself, until one day, you can't even remember who you were before the performance began. But the Stoic doesn't chase the crowd. They choose clarity over claps. They walk away from noise to protect their peace. It's not arrogance, it's not bitterness, it's self-respect. They'd rather be misunderstood in truth than praised in pretense. So ask yourself, when you walk into a room, do you shrink to fit it? Do you speak to be understood, or just to be accepted? When you post, when you speak, when you show up, are you doing it from your core, or from fear of being left out? Let me tell you something real. I've met people who were followed by millions, yet couldn't sit with their own thoughts for 5 minutes. And I've met people who were barely noticed, yet carried a peace so deep, it silenced the room. One chased the world, the other came home to themselves. The Stoics believed that the outer world is noisy, but the inner world must remain still. And that stillness comes from living in alignment. So if you've ever felt out of place, too quiet, too real, too intense, maybe you're not broken, maybe you're just done pretending. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't need the whole world to understand you. You just need to live in a way that allows you to understand yourself, to look in the mirror, and know you didn't trade truth for applause. Because sometimes, the most courageous thing you'll ever do is not be liked by everyone, but be loved by the few who see the real you, and most of all, to finally love the person you've stopped abandoning, yourself, if everyone around you always agrees with you. Maybe you're not growing, just floating in comfort. We often think of relationships as places of ease, places where we feel accepted, seen, safe, and yes, that matters. But what if the purpose of a true relationship isn't comfort, but clarity? See, real friendship isn't always soft. It's not just about laughter, late-night talks, or support during hard times. It's about growth. It's about being challenged, not coddled. It's about being seen, not just celebrated. The Stoics saw friendship as a mirror, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals, that shows you the truth. Even when the truth makes you flinch, Seneca said. A friend should be like a mirror, revealing both the beauty and the blemishes of your soul. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they care enough not to let you lie to yourself. In a world where we're told to cut off bad vibes, it's easy to mistake correction for criticism, to run from discomfort, instead of sitting with it. But here's a deeper truth: You don't grow in echo chambers, you grow in friction. Think about the people closest to you. Do they challenge your assumptions? Do they question your patterns? Do they ever say, "You're wrong"? And here's why, or do they only ever nod along, smile, agree with everything you say? Even when it costs you your growth, the Stoic doesn't fear discomfort, they welcome it, because every moment of reflection, every honest confrontation, is an invitation to evolve. Real friends don't protect your ego, they protect your character. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it's hard, but it's also sacred, because it means someone sees the future in you, enough to challenge the present version of you. So ask yourself, are your relationships protecting your comfort? Or polishing your character? Are you surrounded by people who help you stay the same, or people who help you become more whole? The strongest relationships aren't built on endless agreement. They're built on truth, on respect, on the kind of love that doesn't flinch at honesty, because in the end, the people who truly shape us are the ones who help us see ourselves clearly, courageously, completely. That's not just friendship, that's transformation. So don't settle for comfort, seek truth, and walk with those who are not afraid to show it to you. If you're often misunderstood, maybe you're not difficult, maybe you're just selective. In a world that praises the loud, but forgets the deep, being selective feels like rebellion. But it's not rebellion, it's wisdom. There's a difference between being lonely and choosing to be alone. Some people aren't alone because they can't connect, they're alone because they refuse to settle. We're living in a time where quantity is king. The more followers, friends, invites, the better. But the selective soul knows, not every connection is a blessing, not every smile is sincere, not every friend is a mirror. So what do they choose instead? First, shared values, not vibes. Not trends, but principles, honesty, loyalty, self-discipline. These are the roots, and without them, no connection can stand. Second, sincerity. They don't have patience for small talk dressed as intimacy. They walk away from passive aggression, fake concern, and veiled agendas, not with drama, but with clarity. Third, mutual respect. They respect space, they respect silence, and they stay close only to those who honor boundaries, as much as they honor closeness. Epictetus said, "Only the educated are truly free." But for the selective mind, emotional education matters just as much. They seek those who are willing to grow, not those who cling to comfort, not those who wear masks to be liked. They understand, growth isn't easy, but it's the only kind of connection worth keeping. And if that means walking alone, so be it, because protecting your peace is not selfish, it's sacred. They guard their time, their energy, their truth. Not because they're better, but because they know the cost of giving themselves to people who never truly see them. So if you've been misunderstood lately, take a breath. Maybe you're not cold. Maybe you're not too intense. Maybe you're just done performing. Ask yourself, am I lonely, or am I just no longer willing to betray my values for temporary company? Because sometimes, being alone is simply the price of being real. If your silence makes people uncomfortable, good, because silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And in a world that never stops talking, the strongest ones are those who know when not to. They say silence is empty, but those who live with intention know it's full. The selective mind doesn't speak to fill the air, it speaks when something must be said. Every word is an investment, every sentence a responsibility. In a world addicted to noise, opinions, and instant reactions, silence becomes a rare form of power, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned, not everything deserves your voice. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Let your words be few and well chosen, or let there be silence." That's not passive advice, that's strategy, because when you're selective with your energy, you stop feeding pointless arguments, you stop reacting to things that were never worth your peace, and most importantly, you begin to listen, to yourself, to others, to life. Ask yourself, how many times have you spoken, just to defend your ego? How often do we interrupt clarity with noise? Just to feel in control. The Stoics weren't silent because they lacked courage, they were silent because they had it. They didn't fear confrontation, they feared wasting themselves, on what didn't matter. Silence is not absence, it's presence, sharpened, it's choosing depth over volume, it's learning to be at peace with not always being heard, because your validation doesn't live in someone else's approval. The selective person knows. True strength isn't proven by how loud you are, it's revealed by what you can walk away from, without a word. So if you find yourself speaking less, choosing your words more carefully, guarding your peace like it's sacred, you're not growing cold, you're growing wise, and in that stillness, you'll hear things, no noise, could ever teach you, ever feel completely drained, after talking to people, not because you're broken, but because shallow conversations are starving your soul. Sometimes, being around people feels lonelier than being alone, not because you're antisocial, but because your soul is hungry for depth, and all it's being fed is noise. For the selective mind, superficial relationships aren't just unsatisfying, they are exhausting. You sense it in small talk that says nothing, in forced laughter at rooms that don't feed you, in moments where everyone speaks, but no one truly listens. You leave those interactions feeling emptier, not because you're too sensitive, but because your time and your energy are sacred. Seneca once wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." But modern life wants you to waste it, scrolling, nodding, pretending. We've been taught to celebrate connection, even when it's surface level, to prioritize presence over presence of mind. But connection without meaning, it's just noise. And noise is what drowns the soul. The Stoic doesn't chase company. They value alignment over attention. They'd rather sit in silence than speak to impress. They'd rather be misunderstood in solitude than deluded in a crowd of strangers. To them, every conversation is a trade, and not all trades are worth making. Gossip costs your peace, fake smiles cost your authenticity, pointless chatter, it costs your breath, your presence, your clarity. The selective person doesn't fear connection, they simply refuse to settle. They don't avoid people out of pride, they avoid what drains their soul. They crave depth, not drama, sincerity, not performance. One honest conversation outweighs 100 hollow ones. They know the difference between being liked and being known, between being polite and being real. So if you've ever walked out of a crowded room feeling lonelier than when you walked in, if you've ever looked around and realized no one truly sees you, that doesn't mean you're broken, it might just mean your standards are growing, and that is a sign of wisdom. Depth is rare, so protect it, and don't apologize for needing it, because sometimes the loneliest thing you can do is surround yourself with noise, and the most honest thing you can do is walk away from it. The more people you let in, the louder the noise becomes. But what if peace doesn't begin with more? What if it begins when you let most of them go? This isn't isolation, this is Stoic clarity. We live in a world addicted to more. More friends, more opinions, more attention. We're taught to collect people like trophies on a shelf, to measure worth by how many we know, instead of how deeply we connect. But the Stoics knew something most people forget. Peace is not found in addition, it's found in subtraction. Simplicity, they said, is not just a lifestyle, it's a virtue, and not just in the way we live, but in who we allow into our lives. The Stoic doesn't collect people, they don't surround Themselves with noise, they don't chase crowds or approval, they choose their relationships, the way a sculptor chooses stone, with care, with purpose, with clarity. They ask themselves, does this relationship serve something higher? Does it sharpen my character, or flatter my ego? Does it bring me closer to virtue, or drag me into distraction? Because the Stoic doesn't fear being alone, they fear being surrounded by the wrong energy. Seneca once said, associate with those who will make you better. Not those who just make you feel better, not those who praise you blindly, but those who challenge you kindly. One honest friend is worth more than 100 surface-level smiles. That's not cold, that's clarity. The Stoic doesn't hide, they reveal only what's true. They don't wear masks to be liked, they don't use words to impress. And they don't trade truth for attention. Their selectiveness is not arrogance, it's alignment. And in that quiet space, free from noise, drama, and chaos, they find something rare, stillness. And in that stillness comes reflection, and in reflection comes direction. So if your circle is growing smaller, if your days are quieter, if you've stopped chasing people who drain your peace, good, it means you're not shrinking, you're sharpening. Because the goal isn't to be known by many, it's to be deeply seen by a few. And sometimes, peace doesn't come from who you let in, it comes from who you let go. Not everyone deserves your presence. But you always deserve your peace, every time you say yes. Just to be polite, you betray a small part of yourself. But what if your greatest strength was in the power to say no, not out of anger, not to reject, but to protect your peace, your time, your soul? Most people are afraid to say no, they worry it makes them look rude, uncooperative, cold. But here's the truth, saying no isn't rejection, it's protection. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve your peace, you're saying yes to your time, your energy, and your values. Stoicism teaches this kind of discipline, not as a reaction of anger or ego, but as an act of inner clarity. The Stoic doesn't chase approval, they seek alignment. They're not afraid to disappoint someone, if it means staying loyal to their own principles. They don't explain themselves endlessly, because their boundaries are not up for debate. Think about this, when was the last time you said yes out of guilt, not choice? How did that make you feel afterward? Tired? Bitter? Drained? That's the cost of ignoring your no. A selective person, the kind of person who lives with intention, understands something powerful. Not every opportunity is a blessing. Not every conversation is worth having, and so, they practice restraint. They don't respond to every message, they don't show up to every event, they don't participate in every argument. Why? Because peace is not something you find, it's something you protect. Saying no is how you protect it. It's not about shutting people out, it's about filtering what's worth letting in. And in this filtering, you make space, space for silence, space for depth, space for people who see you, not just use you. Seneca once said, life is long, if you know how to use it. And every yes you say out of obligation is a piece of your life you're giving away without return. So here's a mindset shift. The next time you feel pressure to say yes, ask yourself, is this aligned with my values, or am I just afraid of disappointing someone? Because when you always say yes to others, you slowly say no to yourself, and that's a trade no wise person should make. Remember, saying no isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's the invisible act of self-respect that protects everything you're trying to build. So say no calmly, say it with love, say it without guilt, then watch what happens. You don't lose people, you lose noise, and in that silence, you find yourself again, if you've ever felt out of place in a crowded room. This video is for you, because sometimes, walking away from the noise isn't isolation, it's how freedom begins, they say. When you walk away from the crowd, you lose something, but what if the truth is, you gain everything that truly matters? When a person chooses to live with intention, to be selective in their relationships, they don't end up lonely, they end up free to invest in what actually nourishes the soul, free to protect their peace, free to grow, without the constant noise of shallow interactions. Because here's the thing, when you stop trying to be everywhere, with everyone, all the time, you start showing up fully. Where it truly counts, a selective person may have fewer friends, yes, but the ones they do have, they're real, the kind who show up not just in the celebrations, but in the silence, in the struggle, when no one else does. There's depth, there's truth, the quiet loyalty, that doesn't need to be loud. In that quiet space, something beautiful happens. You gain time to reflect, time to grow, time to build a life, rooted in purpose, not performance. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And much of that imagined suffering comes from trying to keep up with expectations, with appearances, with people who don't even truly see us. But the selective person doesn't waste energy proving their worth. They're not drained by gossip, nor pulled into competition they never asked for. Instead, they focus, they protect their emotional energy, like it's sacred, because it is. And here's what happens. When you live like that, you begin to attract others who live the same way, the kind who value integrity over image, who'd rather sit in silence with you than fake small talk. Selectiveness becomes your signal. It tells the world, I know what I'm worth, and I'm not willing to settle for less. You develop a quiet strength, one that isn't dependent on applause, one that doesn't need validation. To stand tall, you stop fearing solitude and start embracing it. You no longer dread being alone, because now you're finally with yourself. This is not isolation, it's elevation. The selective life is not an empty one, it's a full one, rich with meaningful moments, honest conversations, mutual respect, and shared silences that say more than noise ever could. So no, you didn't lose anything when you walked away from what didn't align. You found everything that does. If this resonates with you, consider walking with fewer but deeper connections. If you've ever found yourself with just a few close friends, not because you couldn't find more, but because you refused to settle for less, this message is for you. Because having few friends isn't a sign you're on the wrong path, it's often the clearest sign that you're on the right one. Not everyone has the strength to walk it, and not everyone deserves a seat at your table. That's not arrogance, that's wisdom. In Stoic philosophy, selective friendship is a form of discipline, an intentional act of self-respect. It's choosing peace over popularity, truth over comfort, depth over noise. We live in a world obsessed with more friends, more likes, more followers, but the Stoic doesn't collect people. They connect, with purpose, with those who reflect their values, integrity, calm, honesty. Their relationships aren't born from convenience, they're born from meaning. They walk alone, not because they are lonely, but because they refuse to walk with those heading in the wrong direction. That takes strength, that takes loyalty, not to trends, but to timeless principles. So if your circle is small, if your phone doesn't buzz all night, if you often choose quiet over chaos, don't be ashamed, be proud, because you're protecting something most people never even realize they've lost: your time, your energy, your soul's direction. One real friend who honors your truth is worth more than 100 who only love your performance. In the silence of fewer connections, you find something richer: depth, growth, safety, a space where your silence is understood, and your truth is welcome. Selective friendship isn't about cutting people off, it's about aligning with those who see you and choose to walk beside you, not for what you offer, but for who you are. This is a quiet superpower, a signal to the world: I know what I'm worth, and I'm not settling for less. You stop explaining yourself to those who never really listened, you stop seeking noise, and start building peace. You no longer fear solitude. Because now, you're finally with yourself. This isn't isolation, it's elevation. A selective life isn't an empty one, it's a full one, rich with meaning, filled with loyalty, shaped by truth. So no, you didn't lose anything when you walked away from what didn't align. You found everything that truly matters. Walk with clarity, choose with purpose, and remember, the fewer you walk with, the further you may go.